this morning here, we are continuing our series through the Gospel of Mark. And just to remind us all that as Mark is writing this account of the life and teaching of Jesus, the audience, the community that he's paying attention to is this group of Christians living in Rome. This is about 20 to 30 years after Jesus' death and resurrection, and a new emperor came into power in Rome named Nero, and Nero began persecuting Christians. And so for this community that was in some ways living decently comfortably up until this moment, when the persecution came, it began to strip them of so many of the things that had put their hope in: their status, their significance, their influence, their finances. And as all those things began to be removed from their life, it exposed in their hearts that, man, we have put our hope in some of the wrong things. And so as Mark is writing this account of Jesus' life, a part of what he's trying to do is to help remind them and help remind us the reality of who Jesus is. That to pay attention to Jesus' life and his purpose and his mission and what he came here to do. To not lose sight of any of that, because when we recognize that, we see that Jesus is actually inviting us to a far greater hope that we can put our hope into. But what can happen so often in our life, and especially in times of struggle, is we can kind of take our eyes off of Jesus. We can stop paying attention to him. And when we stop paying attention to Jesus, it's easy to misunderstand what Jesus actually came here to do and what his purposes are. See, this is a common theme throughout the Gospels, throughout the accounts of Jesus' life. He's constantly misunderstood. People don't really know who he is, and people don't really know what he's trying to do. So often, people are trying to project onto Jesus what they think he should be doing and what they think should matter most in his life. And this morning, we're going to pick up in Mark chapter 3. We're going to look at two different moments in Jesus' life where this is coming to a head. The first is going to be his family, those kind of relationally closest to him, and they're completely misunderstanding him and his purposes. And the second are the religious leaders. So if you want to follow along, we're going to be in Mark chapter 3. We're going to start in verse 20. Michelle will have the verses on the screen as well, if you prefer the big TV. I'm going to read this all the way through because it is one conversation, and then we'll kind of go back and kind of go through it part by part. So I'm going to pick up in verse 20 and go all the way to the end of this section. It says, "Then Jesus entered a house, and again a crowd gathered, so that he and his disciples were not even able to eat. When his family heard about this, they went to take charge of him, for they said, 'He is out of his mind.' And the teachers of the law who had came down from Jerusalem said, 'He is possessed by Beelzebub. By the prince of demons, he is driving out demons.' So Jesus called them over to him and began to speak to them in parables. 'How can Satan drive out Satan? If a kingdom is divided against itself, that kingdom cannot stand. If a house is divided against itself, that house cannot stand. And if Satan opposes himself and is divided, he cannot stand. His end has come. In fact, no one can enter a strong man's house without first tying him up. Then he can plunder the strong man's house. Truly, I tell you, people can be forgiven all their sins and every slander they utter. But whoever blasphemes against the Holy Spirit will never be forgiven. They're guilty of an eternal sin.' He said this because they were saying he has an impure spirit. Then Jesus' mother and brothers arrived. Standing outside, they sent someone in to call him. A crowd was sitting around him, and they told him, 'Your mother and brothers are outside looking for you.' 'Who are my mother and my brothers?' he asked. And then he looked at those seated in a circle around him and said, 'Here are my mother and my brothers. Whoever does God's will is my brother and my sister and my mother.'" Okay. So the story in this section begins, as a lot of these do, with the crowd surrounding Jesus, and they don't even have time to eat, right? They don't have time to sleep, eat. We see this happen often in Jesus' life. It says his family heard about this, and they came to take charge of him. And that's like a prison. They're trying to arrest him. This is not like, hey, let's check in on Jesus. They want to take him by force, and they are saying that he's lost his mind. Now, what it says is because they heard he hasn't been eating. And yes, all moms are still concerned if their kids are eating enough. My mom still is asking 45-year-old Amen, am I eating enough? Am I getting enough sleep? I don't know what the accusation against Michelle is when she asked me that. I'm like, if you knew how much food was going in this body. But that alone would not be enough to justify his family making a 30-mile journey towards him, especially in that time. This would have taken 2 to 3 days. So some of the dots that we can connect that are happening underneath this are two realities. One, again, Mary gave birth to Jesus in a miraculous way. She knows there's something going on with her son. We don't know the extent of it. But part of the mindset is, okay, if you are the Messiah, if you are special, then why aren't you overthrowing Rome and putting Israel back in charge? Why aren't you doing the things you should be doing or that we think you should be doing? In fact, why are you wandering around aimlessly, hanging out with tax collectors and fishermen and sinners and like the lowest of the low? Like, this is not a good look. Like, you're kind of just wandering around. And the second thing is this reality that the things Jesus was saying and the things Jesus was doing was putting him in pretty direct conflict with two groups of people that you really didn't want to be in conflict with. One was Rome, and the second were the religious leaders who wielded a lot of power at that time. And the things Jesus is doing and the things he's saying out loud is making him an enemy of those people, and his family is seeing this. So out of concern, out of fear, out of the fact that they just don't understand the things he's doing, he's not acting in predictable, normal ways. They're trying to come to take him by force and proclaiming he's lost his mind. The story then jumps and begins talking about the teachers of the law, and we'll get back to the section about his parents at the end. Mark does this. A lot of the writers do this. It's called an inclusio. Oscar called it a sandwich. It's called a sandwich as well. And you start a story, and then later you end that story, and it's all connected. But it's to help us understand, oh, this is just one conversation. This is all completely connected to what's happening. And so the story moves forward, and it begins talking about the religious leaders, the teachers of the law who are coming down from Jerusalem. These are the experts, and they're coming down from the mothership to investigate who this young rabbi is and what is it that he's doing. Remember a couple weeks ago, we talked about what it meant to be a disciple of a religious leader, to be like a student of them, meant that you were like the top 0.1%. This is beyond Ivy League. This is the best of the best of the best, just to be a student of one of the religious leaders. And so to actually be one of those leaders, you are the experts. You have all of this figured out. You know the Old Testament inside, outside. You have it memorized. And so as the religious leaders are coming to investigate Jesus, this is the group that should have been the most open to the possibility or the reality that this might be the Messiah. This is a group that should have been the first ones on the front line saying, no, this might be the guy. Because they knew the hundreds of prophecies in the Old Testament that pointed to the reality of who the Messiah would be. They've been waiting for generations for the Messiah to come and to set things right. They should have been the ones that said, oh man, this guy is checking a lot of the boxes of who the Messiah should be. And so these religious leaders come down, but that's not their posture and that's not their attitude. They've already made up their mind about who Jesus is. If you were with us last week, Oscar preached the beginning part of Mark 3, and he shared that story of Jesus walking into a synagogue, and he sees someone suffering. They have a shriveled hand, and Jesus calls that man, and he heals that person's hand. And that should have led to everyone just celebrating, like, oh my God, like this miracle happened in front of us, and this person who's been suffering is no longer suffering. And instead, what happens? The religious leaders watch that, and they begin to huddle up, and they begin to plan to find a way to kill him. So these experts coming in, they're coming in with bias. They're not coming to investigate with hope that maybe this is the guy. No, they've made up their mind about who he is. And when they come, they observe what Jesus is doing, and they begin to lob these accusations about him. What's so interesting is their accusations have nothing to do with the miracles that they're watching. That's not what's being debated at all. They're not coming to say, like, was that guy really healed? Is this like a trick, like a magician? Is this like, no, that's not what's happening here. They're agreeing. Yeah, these miracles are happening in front of us. People who are sick are being healed. People who are demon possessed are no longer. People struggling mentally and physically and spiritually, they're being healed. They're not denying that. What they are going after, the accusation, is yeah, but the only reason you're able to do that is because you're in partnership with the devil. That's their accusation against Jesus. That by the power of Satan, you're able to do these miracles. They've made up their mind. They're not open to who Jesus is. And not only that, they make some serious accusations against him. And so Jesus calls them towards him. And it says he begins telling these parables, and he begins telling these two parables that we're going to look at in a moment. And he uses language like kingdoms and houses and strongman and plundering. And the language Jesus is using is very intentional, because as he's confronting these religious leaders, he's trying to press the conversation to open our minds up as well about the reality of what's actually happening in this world. Jesus is addressing and stepping into this cosmic battle that he is in with Satan. So I want to take just 2 or 3 minutes and kind of refresh our minds on kind of the big picture of what's going on. And then why is Jesus using this language and what does he mean by it? So remember that God created everything, heavens, earth, everything is under God, everything's under his control. But this earth that we live in, this is no longer considered God's kingdom. Because somebody's kingdom is a place where their perfect will is being done all the time. That's what a kingdom is. Where your perfect will is being done all the time, that's your kingdom. For those of you who live alone, then your kingdom is your apartment, your house, your condo. When you walk in, everything's how you want it to be. What you want in the fridge is in the fridge. What you want to watch on TV today, you're going to watch. If you have a roommate or spouse, then your house is no longer your kingdom. You don't have autonomy of what's happening in there. You don't know why the dishwasher keeps getting loaded the way it is. You do not have full control of the situation. So your kingdom is a place where your perfect will is being done all the time. That was earth. That's why God created earth. But we see in Genesis chapter 3, Satan comes to Adam and Eve and begins to drop these seeds of doubt into them. Is God really good? Does God want your best? God might be holding out on you. You know what? You're better going off your own way. Why would you trust God? No, you should go your own way. You can do better on your own. And ultimately, Adam and Eve listen to Satan and decide that they don't want to trust or keep following God. They're going to do it on their own. And in doing so, they break relationship with God and sin comes into this world. And so now this world does not represent God's perfect will. Why? Because there's suffering and there's death and disease and pain and sorrow. That's not God's perfect will. So the place that's God's kingdom now is heaven. Heaven is the place where God's perfect will is being done, where we can share eternity with him. God wipes every tear. There's no pain. There's no suffering. That's where God's kingdom is. And so the earth is often referred to in Scripture as this is where Satan is trying to extend his kingdom. He's called the prince of this earth. That's the reality. And what does Satan's kingdoms look like? His kingdom looks like darkness. His kingdom is evil. What Satan wants for all of us in his kingdom is for us to live lives enslaved by our sins. Satan wants us to live in hostility with one another, that we're all against each other. Satan wants us just to look out for our own interests. It's all about me, not you. Satan wants to keep us distracted. He wants to keep us away from God. Satan wants to keep us discouraged. He wants us to believe that our identity is the worst things we've ever done in our life, and that's what defines us, and every bad thing that happens to us is our fault, and we deserve it. That's where Satan wants to keep us. That's the kingdom that he is trying to spread. That's the darkness, that's the evil. But the good news is what we see when Jesus comes to earth. And remember the announcement of Jesus as he comes. It says that the kingdom of heaven has drawn near. The kingdom of heaven is here. What is that saying? That Jesus is coming, and when he came to earth, he began ushering in his kingdom. Satan wants darkness, Jesus brings light. Satan wants us living in hostility. Jesus calls us to live in harmony with others, to seek the interests of others over ourselves, to bring God's love and compassion and peace and mercy and justice into this world. And as we do, we bring more and more light in the midst of this darkness. That's the kingdoms at play. That's the cosmic war going on between Satan and God. And so as Jesus is being accused of bringing light into this world, of bringing his kingdom into this world, right? What are all the healings represent? God's kingdom. Why? Because there's no suffering and pain in heaven. So Jesus is slowly bringing more and more of that onto this earth. When he is doing that, and these religious leaders look at him, and they're like, nope, you are working with Satan to bring more darkness in this world. So Jesus says, all right, let's have a conversation. So in verse 23, he calls him over and he tells these two parables. He says, how can Satan drive out Satan? If a kingdom is divided against itself, that kingdom cannot stand. Jesus is saying, do you not see that I'm working against Satan? I'm working in opposition to him. We have cross purposes. We're not on the same page. Satan wants to bring darkness, I'm bringing light. Satan wants to keep us enslaved, I'm rescuing people. We are not on the same team. We're working in opposition. And when you work in opposition with someone that is allegedly a part of your kingdom, then the whole kingdom falls apart. I mean, think about, we'll just use football. Think about if you're a football fan, why is it that the same 6 or 7 teams, minus injuries to my poor 49ers, why is it the same 6 or 7 teams are always competing for the Super Bowl? Because they share a same culture, a same value, a same purpose. They're all on the same page, whatever it takes. Drop your egos at the door, common goal. We're all trying to do this one thing. We're working towards it together. Why are the same 7 or 8 teams the ones that are always the worst? Because they have cross purposes. They're working in opposition with one another. They're not on the same page. They're bringing their own agendas into the table. And when a kingdom is doing that, it falls apart. It's true in a marriage. It's true in relationships. It's true in a church. It's true in communities. If we're working in cross purposes, we will ultimately fail. So Jesus is just pointing out, it's not just their illogic. He's trying to expose that they've made up their mind against me. They're saying these things as a way to accuse me. There's not logic to what they're saying. You're working with Satan? Nope, I'm working in opposition to him. I'm working against his purposes. And then he tells the second parable. And he uses language of a strong man in his house. And what Jesus is referring to is Satan is the strong man and his house is the earth. That's what Jesus means. So he says, no one can enter a strong man's house. No one can enter this earth without first tying him up. Then he can plunder the strong man's house. This is the good news. Jesus is saying, you think Satan is strong. You think his evil is spreading in this world. And let me tell you something. He might look strong, but I'm stronger. Because no one would be able to enter this earth and begin to bring light into it and to work in opposition to the work Satan is doing unless he is stronger. I can't go into a strong man's house and plunder from them. I can't walk into Keston's house and steal something. He will hit me and he's bigger than me. So will Grace. The only way I can do it is if I tie them up first. Then you can plunder, then you can steal. Jesus says, you think Satan is strong? I'm stronger. And don't you see this good news? That I have come onto this earth, I have binded him up, and I am plundering from him. I'm stealing from his house. What does Jesus mean? I'm taking you all with me. I'm plundering. I'm bringing everyone out of the darkness and into the light. Whoever would listen, whoever would follow me, whoever is willing, I'm plundering. Come into the light. Come with me because I've tied up the strong man because I'm stronger. This is the good news. Why can't you see that? Evil does not win. Light has come in. And then he tells them and he continues on. This is how I will win. Truly I tell you, verse 28, people can be forgiven all their sins, every slander they utter. Everyone who comes to me seeking forgiveness will be forgiven. Doesn't matter what you did yesterday, doesn't matter what you did last year, that darkest, deepest secret of yours, a thing that is giving you guilt, Jesus says you're forgiven. That's not your identity. That's not what defines you. Come into the light. Come to receive my forgiveness. There's nothing you can do that would ever take that away from you. Come, receive my mercy. That's the good news. And then he looks at these religious leaders, these experts in the law, the people that should have been open to the reality of who he is, the people that came with their mind made up, the people that he knows are plotting to kill him behind his back. And he looks at them and says, if you continue to attribute the things I'm doing to that of the devil, if you keep trying to convince other people that I am working with the devil, if you keep trying to distract and deny the reality that light has come into this world, you're going to find yourself in a place where your hearts are so hardened that you will not come to seek and receive my mercy. Jesus has warned them, you're going way off this course here. And you of all people, these miracles are happening right in front of you. I'm standing right in front of you. And yet you've already made up your mind. And then Jesus' family comes back. His mother and his brothers arrive, and it says, standing outside, they sent someone in to call him. And this language of inside, outside is good language. Jesus is we're trying to get this picture, right? There's a group outside, the ones that misunderstand him, the ones that aren't paying attention, the ones that can't be bothered, the ones that have already made up their mind about Jesus. They're on the outside. And then there's a group inside. And he says they're sitting in a circle around him. And this is the group of people that are open to listening to him. They're trying to figure out who he is. They're paying attention to him. Did they have it all figured out? No. We'll see again and again. They don't quite understand who he fully is. But what are they doing? They're drawing near. They're trying to pay attention. They're trying to listen. They're watching him. They're seeing him. They're listening to his teaching. There's a group on the inside. And they're all circling around Jesus. And they come and tell him, hey, your family's outside. They want to talk to you. And Jesus asks this rhetorical question, who are my mother and my brothers? And then he looks at this group of unremarkable misfits, these people that have, for the rest of the world, really no value. And he looks at all of them and says, this is my family. This is my family, those that are drawing near. And Jesus isn't minimizing or getting away of like his family or family relations. That's not what Jesus is saying. He's trying to open our minds and our hearts to a far greater understanding of what it means to be a family and a community. He's blowing open the doors to it. Imagine Jesus, imagine the God of the universe, the Messiah, doing all these miracles, everything he's doing, and we're gathering around trying to see who he is, and he looks at us and says, you're my family. You're my brothers and my sisters, you're my sons and you're my daughters. Why? Because you're drawing near and you're seeking to understand what it means to be a part of bringing more of my light into this world to push against the darkness. This is what it means to be part of my family. And so Jesus draws us in. And as we close today, there's two things I think that are really important for us to just really keep in mind out of this. The first is that reality of how easy it is to misunderstand Jesus. And it happens all the time, and this isn't for, if you're here and you're like, I'm new to all this, and I accidentally walked in here, I thought this was a school, and now you're in the middle of it, or you've been following Jesus for 20 or 30 years, it is so easy to misunderstand Jesus because our human nature is we start projecting onto Jesus who we think he should be. We start projecting onto Jesus who we think he should be. We want him to care about the things we care about. We want him to be against the things we're against. Take any social, cultural issue, you will find Bible verses supporting both sides of it, right? Now, that is not to say that Scripture doesn't speak directly about some things, but we are so quick to project onto Jesus who we want him to be, the things we want him to care about, and how we want him to operate. We're so quick to reduce Jesus, the God of the universe who created everything. We're so quick to reduce Jesus into ways that we can understand, in ways that make sense for us, right? We want it to be comfortable. We don't want a God who's uncomfortable, but let me tell you, the creator of the universe isn't going to fully make sense to you. And so we want to reduce Jesus, want to domesticate Jesus, want to get him in a way where we're comfortable and makes sense, because the uncomfortable can be scary. And so the question for us is, are we willing to truly sit at Jesus' feet and pay attention to who he really is? And we have the benefit of a book like this. We have 4 accounts of the life and the ministry and the teachings of Jesus. What he actually says, not what we think he says, not what other people. No, we have it right here. This is Jesus' mission. These are his priorities. He tells us again and again what he is here to do and what it means to follow him. Are we willing to be people that press into that step into that, to say, Jesus, I really want to sit at your feet. I want to know what this looks like. And the second thing is, these miracles are happening all around, and people don't know what to do with them. It doesn't make sense. It's out of their comfort level. The religious leaders are attributing it to the work of Satan. And it can be so easy for us in our life to not pay attention to the miracles or the blessings of Jesus, even in our lives and in the world around us. And especially when things get difficult and there's so many things that are not going well, yet we can become fixated with what is not going well, or what we should have that we don't have, or all the darkness that's in the world around us. We can become so fixated on that, we actually lose sight of what are the blessings in front of me. Because when we lose sight of those things, we start losing sight of Jesus. When we start losing sight of Jesus, we stop paying attention to him, and then we start misunderstanding him. And so one of the things that we can do to continue to remain focused on who Jesus is pay attention to the things he's doing in our lives, big and small, and the things around us. Is having a heart and a posture of gratitude, is paying attention to the blessings. Does that mean everything is great in your life? No. And I'm guessing for some of you today, far from it. Is everything great in this world around us? No. Far from it. Yes, there's evil around. But God brought his kingdom here, and light continues breaking through. And so are we paying attention to the blessings in and around our lives? All right, the worship team, back up. One of the ways that can kind of help us get in this posture is that heart of gratitude. And every morning in here, we always end with a song. You might think it's just, a formula or a program, sure. But it is an opportunity to respond. That's why we want to close with always a time of worship. Worship's an opportunity to put into words things that we might be feeling or experiencing. It's an opportunity to say, look, this might be difficult, but I'm going to try to fight to be grateful. Worship is a chance to respond and to pay attention to what God is doing. So we're going to sing a song. It's called Gratitude. We went right at it. Let's just hit this one on the head. We don't need to mess around. And this morning, whether you stand and sing or you sit and contemplate, whatever God is doing with you this morning, in the midst of what I'm sure is going to be a busy day and a crazy week ahead of you, we have these 5 minutes to just pause and say, God, I want to pay attention to you. And I want to stay focused on the work you are doing in my life and in this world. So let's worship.